Here's the other thing. If he's a perfectionist, you know that certain things are going to happen when this happens. So you can count on it. So therefore, this is an advantage for girlishness. If you think every time the dishes aren't done right after dinner, for example, you know that he's going to do this. You can pre-plan your response if you know in advance. The problem is when we too late, we are already hurt, and we can't think of anything a girlish response.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Fascinating Womanhood channel, where we talk about everything that has to do with femininity and building strong, long-lasting, loving relationships. I'm Cherry Lynn, and I'm here with my mom, Dixie Andelin Forsyth. Hi.
Hi.
So today we are talking about the perfectionistic husband. We actually did a video on this about a year or so ago. We watched it recently. Someone directed us to watch it and said that they felt like they had a lot of questions about it. We rewatched it and we thought we should redo that because we didn't do it, which is funny because we are basically being perfectionists here about a perfectionist video.
Most of us have some perfectionistic tendencies, just our own areas. So
yeah, and we wanted to redo it just because, like I said, we didn't feel like the one we did before was very thorough.
It wasn't perfect
It
enough.
wasn't perfect. So what we wanted to do today is discuss the traits of being a perfectionist, because you might be thinking, well, I think of a perfectionist as this, and then someone else might be thinking that a perfectionist is this. And then when you think about it as a woman being perfectionist, and then you think about your husband being a perfectionist, there's just so many different ways we could look at that. So we want to talk about all of those things. And then we want to discuss 3 ways that you can help to understand him and accept him more on a daily basis.
Right. Yeah. I have to add in here that the thing that is hard about a perfectionistic husband is that it wouldn't be hard if we had the same perfectionistic traits. But ours are different. And so it seems like, why is he getting worried about this when it's not a big deal? But something else is. If we had the same ones, we'd say, yeah, that's pretty bad. But it's good we don't, because we balance each other out better.
No, that's a good point. I think, a lot of women find themselves as a perfectionist in certain ways, like you're saying, and they find themselves married to a perfectionist, but they think that, I don't want to say denial, but they think that he's a perfectionist about things that you're not a perfectionist about. So he's the perfectionist. It can go round and round and round when you have this personality trait, because part of having this personality trait is that you expect flawlessness in your life, whether it's in one area or another or all. You have this expectation that might not always be very realistic. So
my name is Mr. Belvedere. Is that clear?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I think it's interesting when you talk about it that way from a man and a woman, and how they look at perfection.
The disclaimer we put in here is that if your man has clinical serious OCD problems, that you should probably see if he's interested in getting some kind of professional help for that. But we're talking about more of a normal range, because there's really, because of what I do with Bob, there's clinical OCD that is extreme. And while we might consider some things our husband does extreme, it usually isn't.
Yeah, this is definitely not for a diagnosed OCD of man that needs professional counseling. This is more for just your everyday perfectionistic frustrations, or
that's different than our own.
that we don't understand. So before we get kind of jumping into it, I think it's helpful for everyone to understand how we view this topic.
Bob is a perfectionist in some areas. He's very careful about his reports, which happily he does, and it doesn't really interfere with anything I do. He's a perfectionist about some things, and that's why I say, so am I. But sometimes those things are a little different. Not like some men that I've seen. Some men that I know, my father was, so I recognize that.
Yes, I think it's fair to say, because I know you and Dad so well, it's fair to say that you fit more of that profile of the perfectionist than he does. He is generally a little bit more laid back, which I love that you have that to bring to this video, because you have the kind of flip side. And then you have me, who is married to a more general perfectionist about more things, almost not everything, but almost everything. And then I have more of the tendencies of perfectionistic. So like Dad, I kind of have more areas of perfectionist.
You want your work to be perfectionist. Okay, so some of the traits of a perfectionistic man, so he's vocal about his preferences, not just specific things things that are important to him.
Perhaps I should tell you I'm a vegetarian. I like fruit juice, coffee, and thinly sliced gluten bread, toasted.
I'll try to remember.
Thank you. Good night.
That kind of thing. And he will say it. He doesn't just think it. He might be physically uncomfortable with things being out of order in the house. Messy houses drive me nuts. I feel like I cannot relax.
You have that female approach to perfectionist. And so I think you understand it probably really, really well. And I know it's different from man to woman, but you understand it at a great level. So I can sometimes call you and ask you questions about my husband, and you can kind of identify, well, I can see where he'd be thinking that.
Well, I know why, because when you're feeling like something else is chaotic, it's a way of feeling like you can control something. Years ago when our kids were little, we'd sometimes have family members come that brought their kids. And so we'd have our family and another family. And it was kind of chaotic for the days that they were there. It was huge meals, huge dishes. So I would clean all the time. I'd mop the floor every day. I'd vacuum every day, sometimes twice a day. Kids would eat in a room that I don't usually let my kids eat in. The only way I could cope with that kind of chaos was to go on overdrive with cleaning. And I remember had a family member once said, just let it go until we're gone. And it made me feel like almost nauseated, because I thought, I can't stand it. If I do, I've got to feel some level of order, even while all these people are here, because already I'm serving dinner for 12 every day. The noise level rises, and I loved having family there, but I also needed this certain amount of order. So what my solution was, I just clean all the time.
I think that's important what you just said about order, because it's really important to note, and I think this is man and woman, usually, not everyone's the same. When they're being a perfectionist, they are craving order. They're not being picky. Some are, I guess, if you start to teeter into the OCD kind of thing, which is not what the video is about. But more generally, the perfectionist, the everyday perfectionist, craves order. And order to them is almost like self-care in a way, because they need to feel that security around them. They need to feel that organization around them.
Certain level, at least a certain level. It not has to be perfect. But when you've got company, you want them to be there, and you love visiting, but you don't love all the couch cushions all over the floor and toys everywhere, and someone is eating a popsicle in your living room and is left half eaten on the floor. Those things can be stressful if that is the way you live. The only way I know is to just do it myself. I don't want to order my guests around, so I just do it myself.
And, I'm sure the perfectionists out there, if there was a perfectionist watching this and saying, hey, I'm not that way. Well, I think that person probably there are things that they could work on themselves. They could work on letting things go. We're not saying that you need to bow down to all of their needs. And of course, every perfectionist could work on letting some things go, but that's not what this is about, because you can't force them.
No, you can't. No.
I've even heard people say to you when I was a kid that would come over, Dixie, why don't you just let it go? It's fine. I've heard people say that to you. I think you know.
And I just thought, okay,
You looked offended. You looked physically uncomfortable. Like you couldn't let some of those things go.
To me, it was like they were saying, don't count on me lifting one finger. And so I thought, okay, for me to survive this, I am going to just mop my floor 3 times a day and do whatever it needs, because otherwise I'll be physically drained if I don't. I understand how somebody emotionally, it isn't anything to do with them. It's not your guests. It's themselves they're trying to deal with. And so I understand when men are that way, if he's that way a little different than you, that could be difficult.
Well, keep in mind too, you physically being uncomfortable about mess might look completely different than a man being very uncomfortable about mess. A man might be very quiet and be grumpy about other things, whereas you might be more direct and verbal and say, oh, this is just so messy. I can't, like, that kind of, you recognizing it in men and women is kind of, it's important to identify that, because once you can identify what's going on with your perfectionist, it will help you to understand them better.
Well, since we're women and we're talking about men, this is dealing with more, how do we deal with a man with this? Because they have their areas. Okay,
Right.
Another one, maybe become easily distracted by disorder and uncleanliness. So it may be hard for him to work.
For my work, I require an atmosphere of Spartan simplicity.
Or do something else, work on a hobby, or even if he's working from home, if there's a certain amount of disorder going on, he can verbally vent about disorder.
Or other things because of disorder.
Just and maybe not even be as aware that he's really uncomfortable with the dishes around or whatever it is, and verbally vent about something else, and taking it out, scapegoating, in other words.
Yes.
He might do that. He might pressure you at times to make things perfect, even if it's like 10 o'clock at night, or you're in the middle of doing something else.
Don't do that, little boy.
Kind of a
Yeah, I think this one's really big, and a lot of women maybe miss it, is that not that they don't know that their husbands are perfectionists, but they may miss why they're irritated or agitated about something. Like, I know sometimes for me on Christmas Day, for example, we can't unwrap presents very joyfully because there's a mess. And I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but
Are you kidding? With 7 kids? Yeah.
It's hard for me because I don't care on Christmas morning about wrapping paper. I just say, go for it. Just rip it off and throw it. And
I always have big garbage bags, and then they get so full, and then it's just whatever, because I never get enough.
Before you know it, I'm looking at him and going, you're missing Christmas because you're so worried about the mess. And so I think that, to me, the time, like, it doesn't matter what time of day it is. It doesn't matter what day it is or what season of life you're in. You know, you've got a perfectionist that's agitated when you have a situation like that and they can't let go.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about what you can do about things like that. So we're going to jump into the 3 ways you can better understand him on a regular basis.
Number 1, look at his history. How did he grow up?
You are a doctor too?
A bone specialist.
Mr. Belvedere, is there anything you haven't been?
Most men who are perfectionists have a history of something in their life happening that might explain why they're perfectionistic in that area. Look at his history, his past. Like, for example, for me, I was raised in a very tidy house. I was used to that, and clutter signified chaos. You know, my dad was that way. I'm more like my dad that way. My mother was not messy, but she could ignore things longer than me. So that's why I think I'm more like him. When you understand someone, you're more tolerant.
I think a lot of ladies might hear this and say to themselves, well, it's no excuse. And it's not meant to be an excuse.
No.
That, oh, I was raised this way, so therefore I get to kind of act this way. Well, no, that's not what it's about. It's more about just seeking to understand why, so that you can respond more appropriately. Like, perfect example, my husband was raised in a family that owned restaurants. So they own these restaurant chains, and he worked in them as a younger kid. And he grew up with a lot of standards in kitchens. So naturally, combine that with his perfectionistic personality anyway, he has some standards in the kitchen. Now, I could just say, well, that's unrealistic. Or, I'm working so hard. How dare you? I could go to that place. Or I could say, you know what? This is important to him. This is all he knows. He has a lot of information and education about cleanliness in the kitchen that he respects, and I can respect a lot of that. So I think part of this has something to do with picking your battles with his perfectionistic by
Yeah.
learning about what he's gone through in his
Well,
life.
and that also, the more you understand a person, the more tolerant you are.
Right.
You really understand them, the more empathetic you are, and the more tolerant.
We had a woman on our group that said her husband was a doctor, and he was very similar about cleanliness in the kitchen. And some of the women said, you know, he had a tendency to be kind of mean to her. And I hope ladies watching this, if you have a husband that's really mean, that's not what we're saying. We're not saying you should be a doormat and whatever if he's being mean to you about cleanliness, that's not okay either. But she said that he would be kind of mean to her and critical about cleanliness. And some of the ladies said, well, him being a doctor, do you think that he struggles with OCD? And it kind of turned into this conversation about cleanliness. And I thought it was interesting to hear that, because it was a way of looking at the situation from his point of view for a moment to kind of see, well, why does he act this way? Why is he so obsessive about things being clean?
Well, I could say that I have a dear, dear brother who's a doctor, and he is not OCD. So
not everyone is.
It isn't just because of one thing. But like you said, if he's grumpy with you or kind of mean, that's another part of Fascinating Womanhood we deal with. So
that's not what we're not talking about, the perfectionistic husband that's mean or verbally abusive.
No, we're not
talking about the everyday kind of agitation of nothing's good enough, that kind of thing.
Okay, number 2, order, because I'm one of these. Order tends to make people like that relax. It may be his work. It makes him feel like, okay, the world isn't so crazy. In this world that we're in, where so many things seem like, oh, there's no control. It's one thing you can control. And it feels like if your personal space is ordered, you can handle the rest. And that's part of that emotional mentality I know that goes along with me. So I'm sure it does with others, that when I look around and this my space is ordered, then I can handle the rest of it better. So that's
so important. I think
it really is
important for men and for women. Like you said, it applies to you too. But I think the reason why we said we're giving 3 tips on everyday understanding is because you might find a lot of success thinking or reminding yourself of that every day. Sometimes I have to do that multiple times a day. If I feel like a standard in my home is a little bit out of my reach for the day and I cannot get to it, and I feel a little bit of that kind of pressure from him, to remind myself, if I do this for him, it's like a gift that I'm giving him, and it will help him relax. And then later tonight, things will just feel a lot better. And I think if you can remind yourself, I know it's so hard and we make it sound so easy, but if you can remind yourself about that relaxation, it will just be such a blessing to you.
Yeah, and sometimes it isn't even the big things. Like I know when a man or a woman is feeling anxious, something like really nicely folded towels in just the right place.
Yeah.
That is an upstairs, it's a gift. And you just do that as kind of your little surprise that you don't even say anything about. Those things are easy to do. And you can give him some of these things, maybe not all of them every time, but some of them. And hey, it's an easy way to give him a gift. Okay, the next one is, what's your alternative? Fights?
Jealousy. I could have wrung his neck.
When a woman wants to wring her husband's neck, she's usually in the wrong.
We know that in Fascinating Womanhood, it doesn't work. And when you fight, nobody wins. It's better not to even go there because you know you're going to lose.
I have a good example of this. My husband, I have learned so much about him as a perfectionist, and we've come such a long way. And I don't mean to share this in a way of like making, anyone think that I am saying anything bad about him. I don't know if that.
No, I know you never would. So,
but I did go through a time where we did not meet on the same page with the dishwasher, and I would load it a certain way. Again, this goes back to the kitchen and the restaurant industry and all that stuff. And I went through a time where I would load it the way I load it, and then he would go and reload it and fix it and organize everything in there. And I went through a time where I would challenge him on it and say, I just worked so hard on loading that. Why would you move everything around? And the reason why I'm bringing this up under the point about what's the alternative is the alternative was always negative. Every time I would not accept that about him or just let him do it and not say anything, it would turn into hurt feelings, misunderstandings. It never worked.
No, it doesn't work.
So what did I end up doing? I ended up watching him load it many times. I still watch him load it. And I just started mimicking him. And I can just see the relief in his eyes when I do. And I still don't do it the way that he wants me to, but I do it much better than I used to. And it's automatic for me now. It's not even extra work. So I know that's just a small thing and it's silly, but if you're experiencing some of these things with your man on a grand everyday basis and it's just getting you, especially for the ladies that are more laid back, there's ladies out there that are like, why does everything have to be so perfect? If you can just try to think about what he's thinking from his point of view, it will just later on, I promise, it will be so much easier for both of you.
And ultimately, it isn't that hard.
It really
do it his way. Just do it his way. The end of subject, and
yeah.
moving on because there's so many other things we deal with. Okay, now we're ready for the 3 tips to help you be happier in your life with a perfectionistic man. Okay, prioritize what's most important. Maybe the things that he wishes were perfect, you can think of more of his wish list, what he wishes, and you can try to help with as many of those as you can and cut yourself some slack on doing it perfect today or tomorrow, because he may always be more perfect. Well, you wouldn't have a problem if he wasn't more perfectionistic than you in those areas. You can also look at it as, how would I feel if someone was trying to change me in my little areas?
Everybody has a wish list, whether you know it or not. Everyone, I believe this about everyone, even people that aren't perfectionists. Everyone has something, especially in their home, that they appreciate the most, being tidy, clean, or both. So what is his? What is yours? You might find that his is the opposite of yours, and that's fine too. You can still practice how to balance your wish list between each other. If his is the kitchen and yours is the bathrooms or yours is the laundry, those are the 2 things that you focus on. Doesn't mean that everything else gets dropped, but at all times, those are kind of on your alert. It will help you so much more to let go of little things.
Well, and when you have small children who leave toys around, that's the big thing. We all know that. What I did is I made sure they were picked up every night before I went to bed. Now, that was me. Bob wouldn't.
Your wish list.
Well, I picked them up. I just did it because it was important to me. And Bob wouldn't have liked it if I just left him out. He thought his mom was too messy. And he told me many times he appreciates that I don't do that. But he doesn't always think to do it himself because he's focused on other things. Number 2, and it's debatable whether that should be number 1, accept him at face value. Think, okay, my guy is a perfectionist in these areas. Therefore, I'm not going to try to change him. It not only won't work, it actually hurts to try to change him. So accept what is means that you don't try to change him.
So he flew off the handle.
Harry was always that way, dear.
Try to help him with it if you can. It comforts him. It actually is a love language.
This is a really lifelong thing to practice.
It is.
And it takes time, and you might backslide and you might say, oh, I've accepted him and I'm good. And then you might have a time.
You probably will. You probably backslide a lot, but that's okay too.
But I think too, one of the wonderful things about accepting his perfectionistic sides doesn't mean that you turn your back and you become a doormat and it's just all done. It means that you understand that it's something that it's the way he is and you can't change it. And that you're just going to do the best that you can every single day with it. And you're not going to fight it. It is such a weight that is lifted. I speak from experience. This is such a weight that is lifted off of your shoulders. And it's not always going to be easy. There's going to be peaks and valleys. But if you can learn to just say, you know what, this is the way he is. I need to accept that this is just the best that he can do.
You can actually learn to kind of be amused by it in an affectionate way. You don't have to have the same response you've always had. Like, for example, one area that Bob is a perfectionist about, that I know you know about this, he can't stand lint or little hairs on somebody's clothes. He'll come and start.
He'll come pick it off of me too. He'll be like,
He'll pick it off. And
Good.
And instead of thinking, oh, he thinks I'm not perfect, it's just his little thing. It's easier to kind of smile to yourself and say, oh, here it is again.
That's a very professional bandage. There aren't many people who could do that.
And not take it as a negative.
right.
Take it personal. Then number 3, girlishness. Be girly. This is perfect opportunity to practice the principle of girlishness, which we talk about in Fascinating Womanhood a lot, because it falls under some of those things that men sometimes do that are thoughtless. It may be thoughtless if he's picking on you, or he's kind of grumpy, which could be because he's uncomfortable because things are not just so at home.
Well, what are you waiting for?
Nothing. Now I know where we stand.
And you can watch our girlishness video for that, because that's a fun video. I was really happy to do that one.
Yeah, that video, this whole subject, I think we could go on and on for another hour about this subject, but that's why we did a video on it, because it's a big one. But learning how to diffuse tension with your perfectionistic husband is such a lifelong pursuit for some, and it's easy for others. I know for me, it's hard when my feelings are hurt and I feel like I'm in this environment where flawlessness is expected. It's tough.
Yeah, it is.
Use that by being sweet and cute. So it's just, you have to do what works for you, and you have to practice.
Well, and that is also why it might be good before you practice girlishness to first work on your own reaction to it of taking it personally. Because when we get hurt, it's because we're hurt. We took it personally, and it's because we don't understand that it may not be us exactly, as more just his trying to calm his feelings. And he isn't trying to say you're not good enough, which is what we automatically often think. I am not measuring up. I'm not good enough, when it may be something totally different. So if you are able to at least go in the direction of not taking it personally, girlishness will be much easier.
True. And I think even just what you just said about identifying all that is the first step in saying, you know what, I'm really hurt right now. And what he just said, maybe it was a little out of line, maybe it was a little rude, but why did he say that? It can't be because all these negative things, A, B, and C, like you said, I'm not good enough.
I'm a loser. I'm no good.
Chances are it's not that extreme. And it's probably something going on with work, or something going on with him personally, or he's tired, or we go back to the list that we talked about earlier. He needs to relax. He needs this order. He needs whatever it is he is kind of obsessing over. He might need it.
Now then, buddy, put the cloth in the right hand, like that, and wash. And no conversation.
He might need it to feel like he has accomplished some things. Men are very task oriented. He might just have a lot of tasks on his mind, and he's in this task mode. I think those things are all really important to just identify before you even start to think about what's my girlishness, response.
Well, here's the other thing. If he's a perfectionist, you know that certain things are going to happen when this happens. So you can count on it. So therefore, this is an advantage for girlishness. If you think every time the dishes aren't done right after dinner, for example, you know that he's going to do this. You can pre-plan your response if you know in advance. The problem is when too late, we are already hurt, and we can't think of anything, a girlish response.
Right. And in that sense, I would say, try not to say a whole lot of anything and think about it. Just from my experience, if I feel really hurt and I can't think of a girlish response because I'm just too hurt, and he's going off on his rampage about things being perfect or whatever it is, I tend to the best thing for me, and this is hard for me because I'm very, very verbal. And when I get upset, I'm even more verbal, which is a problem that I have to work on. But what I have practiced is to just be quiet and kind of take my moment to think, because that's what helps me. It may not be like that for you, but that's what helps me. And then I can come back to it later when I've calmed down.
One other idea, if you can manage it, is if he says this isn't right, you can go don't push against it. Go with it. Say, you're right. It's horrible. It's the most horrible thing I've ever seen, and do even more extreme than him, which is also a type of girlishness, as long as you keep sarcasm out of it. You can say, I don't know how you could live with a person like me that, you can go with and say, you're right. We got to take care of that. And then
I did that literally like 2 or 3 days ago. He opened the fridge and he said, there's something really gross that spilled in the very, very back of, like, you could barely see it. And I said, oh my gosh, what is that? I can't believe you saw that. I'm going to get right on that as soon as I can. And it wasn't sarcastic. I was really genuinely did not see it. And I was in the back and I didn't see it. But he, instead of saying, I could have been offended by it and been like, well, I just cleaned the fridge, because I did. I just cleaned it. I just didn't see it.
Well, and he's taller than you, so he probably is looking down.
Exactly. And I just, and a few years ago, I probably wouldn't have responded that way. I probably would have been hurt. I probably would have been like, but I just cleaned it. But instead of saying that, I just say, yeah, you're right. There is a big thing. What is that? I wonder what that is. Thanks for showing me. And I didn't say it in a sarcastic way. I just said, oh, thanks. I'm gonna clean that up, because that means a lot to him, and it's not that big of a deal for me to wipe it off. So
plus he feels then like he's won, which is very important.
And he felt like he was helping too.
He was helpful.
He was helping, and he genuinely felt like he was helping. I don't say that in a condescending way. He really did genuinely, because I understand him, and in the kitchen, I knew that meant a lot to him. So I love that tip. I think that's a really good one that you bring up, to just kind of go with it from time to time if you can.
Say, you're right. This is horrible.
Terrible. How can we live this way?
Okay.
Those are all of our tips. There are probably 1,000 more tips. This could be a book. This could be a whole book. Yeah. It's such a big subject, but I think I'm so glad that we redid this one, because I feel like there are so many really specific things that are helpful to do every day. And these are just our favorite.
They're more kind of basic ones. Hey, in Fascinating Womanhood, we're all about understanding men and creating these lifelong relationships. If we can help in some way, not by changing them, but by helping them feel comfortable, then that's my goal. And I know it's your goal too.
Yep. And that's exactly why we did this video.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been so helpful. All of you ladies out there that are watching this, we would love to hear your stories. Please feel free to drop them down below. I know a lot of our ladies are more private, and that's absolutely fine.
Oh, yeah.
If you would like to leave any questions or stories down below, we love hearing your stories. It's so inspiring to hear from all of you every day. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to read all of your comments. We just love it. So if you have any questions or comments about the subject, we would love to see them down below. We are here every week, so don't forget to check back with us next week. I'm also attaching links to Dixie's books, her brand new book, and her workbooks. Everything is attached to this video. You'll definitely have to check those things out. And don't forget to join our Facebook group. We're very active on social media. We're also on Instagram. And if you have a subject that you would like us to cover, we also love to hear that too. So drop that down below as well. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
See you next time. Bye.